I'm Dawn Hill, host of Heart, Mind, and Purpose, a podcast where we explore what it means to live an aligned and wholehearted life. I am a professional counselor with over 25 years of experience and a deep love for meaningful conversation. I bring you honest reflections, soulful questions, and meaningful tools for managing life. Whether you're seeking clarity, connection, or simply a space to breathe, this podcast is here for you. Tune in weekly and join me on the journey.
Welcome to Heart, Mind, and Purpose, a podcast exploring the tools we carry for emotional, spiritual, and relational growth. Hi, this is Paul Gramercy, producer of today's episode, where Dawn invites us into an honest conversation about shame-based thinking, what it is, how it shows up in our lives, and how we can begin to break free from its grip. With practical insights, personal reflections, and hope for change, this episode will speak to anyone who has ever felt not enough. Now here's your host, Dawn Hill.
Hi, before we get started, I want to share something personal with you. You're listening to someone who knows this subject from the inside out. I'm a recovered, or maybe I will say recovering, shame-based thinker. For many years, shame was in charge of every part of my life. It poisoned my relationship with God, with myself, and with others. But over time, I began to see it for what it really was, a lie, a tyranny. I wanted freedom, and step by step, I learned to understand shame, to name it, and to begin loosening its grip on my life. I share this because I do have the professional and academic background, and what is more, I have the life experience of growing up in a shame-laden home and developed a life that was grounded and rooted in shame. I'm no longer living that life, and I want you to hear that. I truly believe that if I can learn, if I can heal, and if I can step out of shame-based thinking into living, then anyone can. There is hope. Shame is the inner sense that says there's something wrong with me that isn't wrong with others. It's a belief that I should be perfect, that I shouldn't have any problems, limitations, or needs. And the cruel twist is that this standard does not apply to anyone else, just me. Living with that lie cements a deep, destructive belief. I am uniquely flawed. I am worth less than others. I am defective. Some people carry shame so long that they don't even realize it's there. It's like music in the background of their life. It's the only truth they have ever known, and it affects choices, relationships, self-worth, and even faith. I also want to make a distinction that often gets blurred. Shame and guilt are not the same. Guilt is about something you did. It's the feeling of remorse for an action or an inaction that hurt someone. Guilt often comes with the desire to make it right. Shame, on the other hand, is not about what you did. It's about who you are. Shame says, I am bad, I am fundamentally flawed, and I am not enough. The experience is more like this example I often use in my counseling practice with people. And it's an example I'm going to use of a 5-year-old boy who has been told his whole 5 years, don't jump on the bed, you'll get hurt. So this little boy is jumping on the bed because that would be fun. And he flies off. And he lands on the floor and he is hurt. And he starts to scream and cry. And his parent comes into the room and says, oh my gosh, honey, get in here. He's fallen off the bed and his arm's all askew. He's broken his arm. Hurry up. And then they come in and they're like, stop crying. We told you not to jump on the bed. What should we do? They start wondering to each other out loud. Meanwhile, he's crying on the floor and they're telling him, stop crying. They say, okay, we're going to go to the hospital. Now just stop crying. They get him in the car and he's still crying because he's hurt. And they're talking about insurance and about how vacations will be canceled and how will they pay for the bill. And he's in the back seat being told, quiet down, stop that crying. When they arrive at the hospital, the people in the emergency room are kind to the little boy and say, oh, honey, we know it hurts. You try to calm down. Let's breathe together. The doctor's coming. We're going to get you help. And mom and dad begin to say the same things. Any 5-year-old's going to think, oh, yay, mom and dad are like the other big people. Everything's okay. And they go through a whole experience. He gets a cast and they leave and they're in the car on the way home. And lo and behold, he hears, "Now this is why we told you not to jump on the bed, that you would hurt yourself. And sure enough, you have. Now you've broken your arm and you're in a cast. And I hope you'll listen to us in the future because we told you not to do this." Now let's flip that experience around to a different set of parents. Same exact scenario. He's jumped on the bed. He's crying on the floor. And the parent walks into the room and says, "Oh my goodness, honey, come in here. He's hurt. He's fallen." And they begin to get down on his level and tell him it's okay. Let's try to calm down, breathe with us. We're going to go to the hospital. We're going to get you help. It's going to be okay. You're going to be all right. They try to comfort them with their words, and they get him in the car, and on the hospital, they don't do anything except for saying, "We're almost there. It's going to be okay. We're going to get a doctor to fix this for you, and the pain will stop." They get there. All the big people are the same as mom and dad. And the doctor fixes the arm, and they get in the car, and on the way home, there's no discussion of bills or money or being chided for what had happened. They're just like, "We're so glad the doctor was able to help you." Now, later that evening or the next day, they may sit that little boy down and say, "Now, honey, this is why we told you don't jump on the bed, because you might fall off and get hurt, and that's what happened. So please remember these warnings we give you." The distinction here between the two parents, I'm not saying one set is evil and one set is perfect. I'm saying one set is rooted in shame themselves, and so they shame their child through this whole experience. They're caught up in all the practicalities of it, and they're forgetting this is a little person. The other parents are nurturing, they're accepting of him, and they help him through a difficult moment, and then later return to the lesson. This will help this little boy grow up with much less shame running his mind, whereas the other little boy will think, well, this is the way life is. You just get in trouble when you make a mistake. And so what I usually help people see is that in the first example, the little boy learns, I made a mistake, but that's not really what he learns. He learns, I am the mistake. So in the first example, the little boy learns, I jumped on the bed, and therefore I am a mistake. The second little boy learns, I jumped on the bed and I made a mistake, and I'm okay. What is learned here in this made-up example is very important for each of these little boys. One will learn, I will make mistakes in life and I'll be okay. The other will learn, I will make mistakes in life because I am a mistake. One is very hopeless and one has a lot of hope. Now, before we go further, I want to pause and make an important distinction because this is where a lot of people get tangled up. If you've listened to my podcast on our toolboxes, you will have heard how much I love the tool of distinction, and here I am using it for a second time. There is a difference between conviction and condemnation. Conviction is when the Holy Spirit gently points out something in us that needs attention or change. It's specific, it's clear, and it always carries with it a sense of hope. Conviction says, this behavior, this choice, this attitude isn't good for you. Let's deal with this so you can be free. Conviction always invites us forward. It's like a nudge towards healing, growth, and restoration. Condemnation, on the other hand, is shame's loud, accusing voice. It's not specific. It doesn't lead anywhere but down a shame spiral. Condemnation says you are bad, you'll never change, and you are unworthy. Where conviction feels like a light shining into a dark corner, condemnation feels like a heavy blanket suffocating us. When we confuse the two, we mistake condemnation for conviction. We end up stuck in an endless bind. We feel crushed under the shame, but we think it must be God speaking. And that misunderstanding keeps us living in confusion, believing lies about ourselves and about God. So here's the bottom line. Conviction makes us want to talk with God, and it is about a specific behavior, and it points to hope and change. Condemnation makes us want to run and hide because it's about our identity, and it says, you're the problem. I have this cartoon in my head about Adam and Eve, and Eve has eaten the fruit, and she offers it to Adam, who eats, and then they realize they're naked. And at some point after that, they hear God walking in the garden, as they usually did, walks in the garden with them in the cool of the day. And I have this picture of Adam and Eve, each sitting or standing in a bush, and God saying, where are you? And they're like, we're right here. Don't you see us? We're bushes. And God said, why are you in a bush? Oh, no, we're bushes. We've always been bushes. Don't you see these leaves? We've always been a bush. We don't know what you're talking about, God. We've always been a bush. It's that sense of condemnation that they already felt because they knew what they had done and now they were lying about it. Sometimes, maybe when we're younger or at our current ages, we do similar things. We try to call it something other than it is. However, it still keeps us stuck and in a bind. Shame rarely travels alone. It usually brings along its other partner, the word should. I refer to should and shame as the diabolical twins. Together they trap us in an exhausting cycle, believing we should be perfect, all the while knowing we never can be. And so we end up shoulding on ourselves all the time. One of the first assignments I often give clients when we start talking about shame-based thinking is I just want them to spend a week not changing anything, but learning to be an observer in their own life. And I'd like them to try to observe how many times they should upon themselves, how many times they should upon others. And I ask them not to count because the number will be too high and that will be exhausting. The point of the exercise is to recognize something we haven't seen before. How much should is driving our thinking and behaving and feelings. When we do that, we are just trapped. There are countless situations that can set off a shame spiral, and here are just a few examples. Being late for something important, mispronouncing a word or making a factual mistake, forgetting someone's name, starting a new job and having to ask a question on the second day that was gone over on the first day of training, all the while unrealistically expecting ourselves to know what we heard from the day before perfectly. And we should on ourselves, and we feel ashamed because we have to ask a second time. And in reality, it's only the second day, and most new employers don't expect you to know everything on that first day. But should will tell us we must. Failing to meet a deadline or disappointing someone's expectations. Now, sometimes this can be real, and sometimes that can be imagined. Sometimes we know someone has an expectation of us, and we disappoint that. But instead of saying sorry and carrying on, we end up down a shame spiral. And sometimes we think they have an expectation, but we don't know for sure, but we are sure we disappointed them, and so that's a whole other shame spiral. Some of these things are things on the surface that may seem small, but to someone stuck in shame, they feel like evidence that I am less than. This is a real feeling. It's like having a heavy anvil sitting right on our chest. The weight is so much, it's just too much to carry. So let's talk about some of the mental and emotional patterns that shame creates. This is not an exhaustive list, it's just a few common examples, but they show how shame works its way into our thinking. Personalization, believing that everything that happens is somehow about me. If something goes wrong, it must reflect on my worth. Excessive rationalization, explaining over and over explaining in order to avoid blame or criticism. Guilt-prone thinking, assuming that I am the cause of every problem in every relationship. Self-labeling, saying things like, I'm such an idiot, I'm a bad person, I'll never get it right. Black and white thinking, seeing only in extremes, all good, all bad, success or failure, loved or abandoned. There is nothing in between. Shame convinces us that we are never enough, no matter what we do. One of the biggest symptoms of shame is perfectionism. Perfectionism is bondage. It is the relentless pursuit of flawlessness. Driven by the fear of shame and judgment, perfectionists aren't just hard on themselves, they are often hard on others too. And when the cycle breaks, it usually swings the other way into neglect, as they no longer can keep up all the work to keep perfectionism going. It's exhausting on every level of who we are, and so we give up into neglect. The perfectionists may stop keeping up their appearance, overperforming, cleaning, being responsible, because the weight of never being enough finally crashes down into neglect. We're going to take a deeper look at perfectionism in the next episode, but for today, remember, perfectionism is not strength. It's shame's disguise. shame just doesn't affect how we think, it seeps into our relationships. It can create trust problems, making it hard to be vulnerable and authentic, always wearing a mask. It breeds hypersensitivity to rejection, where a missed text or a forgotten coffee date feels like total abandonment. It drives approval addiction, working harder and harder just to feel acceptable. This is also known as people-pleasing. Often people-pleasing happens at the expense of the shame-based thinker and or their family, their spouse and children. They will trade off things to please another, even if it causes their family pain. It fuels fear of conflict or criticism because disagreement feels like proof of not being good enough. It can even lead to controlling or manipulative behavior because asking for what we need feels impossible. At its core, shame tells us we are not worthy of love or respect, and when we believe that, our relationships suffer deeply. Shame shows up in the stories we tell ourselves, and maybe you've thought or felt some of things like this. To be accepted, I must appear perfect. If people really saw me, they would not like me or abandon me. I shouldn't have needs, I shouldn't have limits, and I should be able to meet their needs. I work twice as hard just to feel half as good. If any of those sound familiar, even a little, you may well be wrestling with shame-based thinking. Shame is sneaky. It disguises itself as motivation, as humility, even as responsibility. But at its core, shame is a lie, and it tells us we are not enough. Here's the truth. You are not defined by your worst moment. You are not measured by perfection, and you are not alone. I know this because I've been there. I have lived under the weight of shame, and I am now living my life mostly free from the voice of shame. It does try to lift its head from time to time, but when you know how it thinks, talks, and walks, you learn to recognize it. I love that word recognize because it's recognize, and cognize is to think, so we're rethinking about it. So when you know those things, how it sounds, how it talks, how it walks, you can learn to recognize and practice living free from its lies and tricks. Believe me, I'm not saying I am perfect about all of this. I'm just saying I know I do not have to be perfect. And as far as I know, this side of heaven, none of us must be or will be perfect. It is not our job to be perfect. If we are to be wise, we will practice and learn, another key tool to living, to live free and out of the grip of shame and perfectionism. In our next episode, we'll dig deeper into perfectionism and how it grows out of shame and how we can break free from its grip. Remember, there is hope, always. Until next time, may you be kind to your heart, clear in your mind, and grounded in your purpose. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for tuning in to Heart, Mind, and Purpose with Dawn Hill. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving a review to help others find us. You can learn more about the show by visiting dawnmariehill.com and click on the tab that says Heart, Mind, and Purpose. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.